Hi, it's Megan. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be sharing with you 3 of my favorite make ahead breakfast ideas. These are 3 recipes that I make very often, and they are super great to make once and then you can just kind of pick and eat at them all week. Also, they all freeze really well, so if you want to make a big batch of any of these recipes, you can freeze them and just pull them out as you need them. Make sure you check out the description box below where I will share all of the recipes and the links to the original recipes that I found that I have been using. So let's get started with the English muffin bread. We're making English muffin bread right now. In here I've already added 5½ cups of warm water and 2¼ tablespoons of yeast, as well as 3 tablespoons of sugar. I'm going to let that proof for about 5 minutes just so it can get nice and bubbly. It looks like it's already starting to proof. After that, I'm going to add 2 tablespoons of salt and 11 cups of flour. This recipe makes enough for 4 loaves. So if you want to make less than that, you obviously can cut the recipe in half or in fourths. But I'll put the full 4-loaf recipe down in the description box below. So we're going to let that proof and then I'll show you us mixing the dough together. Okay, so now we're going to add our 11 cups of flour to this dough. I like to add about half of it, get it mixing, and then work on the rest of it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, I'm going to wait on this last cup and see how things are mixing and slowly add it if we need to. Alright, and while that's mixing, we're going to add our salt. Okay, and then we definitely need our other cup of flour, so I'm going to add that in. 11, good. We might need a little bit more. Okay, that's a little bit sticky, so I'm going to add a little bit more flour. Okay. About 1/3 of a cup or half a cup.
Whoa!
All right.
It looks like a honeycomb.
Looks like a honeycomb. Okay, so let me show you. So this is what the dough looks like. It is going to be like a shaggy kind of sticky dough. But after it raises, it'll start to come a little bit more together. So now that it's like this, we're going to move it to another bowl and let it raise until doubled. It usually takes about 1 to 2 hours depending on how warm your kitchen is. So our dough has doubled in size, and so we're going to dump it out and shape it into 4 loaves to put into our dough pans and our bread pans, and then we are going to let those raise again up to the top of the pans before we cook them. We will bake it at 350 for 45 minutes. So I'm just going to punching this down now, and it isn't nearly as sticky as it was when I transferred it into this bowl. It's still a little bit sticky, so I am going to add a little bit of flour to my counter for me to turn it out on. And just to kind of help mix it a little bit. So since I'm going to be shaping this into 4 loaves, I'm going to kind of form it into a big loaf right now, just to kind of get it a little bit even. Make sure things are fairly level. And then I'm just going to use my bench scraper. This is one of like my favorite kitchen tools. And I'm just going to kind of cut it into 4 equal-ish sections. Then I have my 4 bread pans here. I'm just going to spray these and then I'll transfer the loaves into them. Okay, so now that those are sprayed, I'm just going to take each section of dough and just kind of plop it into each of my bread pans. The dough is so soft that it's really hard to actually like shape into a loaf. So I kind of just plop it in there and then it'll raise. Okay, so let me bring you around. So this is kind of what they are looking like. As they raise, they will fill up the bread pans pretty easily. So right now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to set them over here on my stove. Let me turn the light on so you guys can see. So I'm just going to set them on my stove. My oven is still a little bit warm from a baking project that I did earlier today. So I'm just going to let those raise over here, maybe. It helps if they can stay somewhat level. Okay. So I have all these just over here on my oven, on my stove. Okay, so then I'm just going to get some clean dishcloths and cover these, let them raise for another about hour or so, just until they come up to the top of the pan, and then we will get them in the oven. Okay, my oven is preheated, and I think my bread is ready. So let's pull off the covers. So this is definitely a bread that isn't going to get like the nice big regular like dome on it. It's definitely a much flatter kind of bread. So as you can see, this one probably could raise a little bit longer, but the rest of them are ready. And I just want to get it in the oven. So I'm just going to stick all these in my oven. Like I said, I preheated it to 350 degrees, and we're going to bake these for 45 minutes. Okay, so I just pulled the bread out of the oven. There's all 4 loaves. So what I like to do after it comes out is I just take a stick of cold butter and just kind of rub it over the tops of them. You don't have to do this, but it's something that I like to do that I think makes it taste extra yummy. So after it comes out, I do that directly when it comes out of the oven, and then I let it cool in the pans for a little bit until it releases from the side, and then I dump it out onto a cooling rack to cool the rest of the way. Okay, so here's what you need to make the bacon croissant casserole. You're going to need enough croissants after you cut them and break them up to fill the bottom of a 9x13 pan. The original recipe calls for a pound of them, or about 5 to 7 small to medium croissants. I just kind of use however many it takes to get in the bottom of a 9x13 pan. And these I actually had a while ago and froze them. I just ripped them up so that they'd be ready to use in the casserole, and then I just froze them like that so that it'd be even faster. You're also going to need a cup of half and half or heavy cream. The original recipe calls for heavy cream. I just have half and half, so I'm using that today. 2 cups of milk, It calls for 8 to 10 slices of bacon. I just use the pre-crumbled bacon and just kind of sprinkle on however much I want. The original recipe calls for half of an onion, but I'm just going to use this dried onion. I found that it works really good in this recipe. And then since I'm using these, I don't have to pull out a frying pan just to cook my onions. So if you are using raw onions, the original recipe calls for you to cook them in the bacon grease. But since I don't want to pull out a pan just to cook onions, it's easier just to use these. And then you're going to need 9 eggs, and you're going to need 2 cups of shredded cheese, as well as some salt and pepper. Okay, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to spray the bottom of your pan. Because this is a very eggy dish, you want to make sure that you spray your pan so that everything will come out. And then you're going to take your croissants and put them in the bottom. What I found to be easiest, you can rip them up, or what I found is easiest just to get out your bread knife and to just cut them up into chunks. And then you just want to make sure that it's enough to make a single layer down here on the bottom. I've made this before with extra croissants that I've just chunked up and froze. And I've cooked it from frozen before, and it's been totally fine. So if you want to do it that way, you can do it that way. It's very easy. You're going to sprinkle some bacon across the top. So like I said, I'm just using this pre-crumbled, pre-chopped bacon. And I'm just going to put a couple handfuls on here. You can do however much or little as you want. I got this from Sam's Club. I know they also sell something similar at Costco, and it's definitely the best price getting it from one of those 2 places. Okay. And then after that, you're going to sprinkle on your 2 cups of cheese. Again, I don't really measure with this. I just kind of sprinkle it on until it covers the top. I do about a handful and a half, 2 handfuls. I have kind of big hands. Okay, now what we're going to do is we are going to mix up our liquid mixture to pour over the top of this. So we'll set this aside for now. I really like doing this part in a spouted mixing bowl because it makes it a lot easier to pour over the top of the casserole. So in here we're going to add our 2 cups of milk, our 1 cup of cream, or half and half, which is what I'm using, and our 9 eggs, as well as our spices and our minced onions. Okay, now that I have my milk in there, I'm going to add in my eggs. I'm also going to add a couple of sprinkles of these dehydrated onions. You could also use onion powder if you don't want like the texture of onions. And then I'm going to add a 1/4 teaspoon of pepper and 1.5 teaspoons of salt. And then I'm just going to mix it up. You can use a hand blender, a whisk. I have this thing, I don't even know what it is, a hand whisk that I really like using when I'm doing stuff with eggs because it whisks the eggs really, really well. Okay, you want your eggs to be nice and fluffy and get everything mixed really well. And then we're just going to pour it carefully over the top of the casserole. I'm trying to go slow so that the bread has time to soak in the egg mixture. A lot of those onions kind of stick to the bottom, so I kind of like to make sure that they're mixed in a little bit. That way they're not just like completely chunky and like dried up on top. So also you can try to push down your croissants as much as you can so that they get covered by the liquid. And then in the original recipe, it says that you're supposed to let this soak for like 4 hours, I think. So you can just let it refrigerate for 4 hours up to 12 hours, but don't do it longer than 12 hours because then everything just gets too mushy. But I found that I like just baking it from this state right now because then I can still taste like the big chunks of croissant, which I really like. So this needs to go into 350-degree oven. You'll cook it for 45 to 50 minutes. Here is what you need to make applesauce cinnamon bread. You're going to need a 1/4 cup of oil, any neutral flavored oil will work, 2 eggs, 1/2 cup of sugar, 1/2 cup of brown sugar, 1 3/4 cup of flour. It originally calls for whole wheat flour. I don't have quite enough whole wheat flour, so I'm going to use what I have ground already and then supplement with white flour, which is totally fine. And then you're going to need a teaspoon of vanilla, and then you're going to need a teaspoon of baking soda, 1/2 teaspoon of baking powder. You're also going to need 1/2 teaspoon of salt, and you're going to need 1 to 1.5 tablespoons of cinnamon, 1 teaspoon of nutmeg, 1 cup of unsweetened applesauce. If you're using applesauce without cinnamon, you definitely will want to do more of like the 1.5 tablespoons of cinnamon. If you are using an applesauce with cinnamon, you'll just need 1 tablespoon of additional cinnamon. And then you also need a 1/4 cup of buttermilk or sour cream, which I forgot to pull out. And then I've made this before, and this time I'm going to try adding some cinnamon chips, just because I thought that would give it some good texture, but you don't need these. These are totally just an extra fun thing to add. Okay, I'm going to start out by adding my 1/4 cup of oil. This is one of my favorite kitchen utensils. It's a tablespoon liquid measuring cup, and I use it all the time. Then I'm going to add my eggs. And I'm just going to whisk these together. This is also one of my favorite kitchen utensils. I'll link both of those below. Now I'm going to add my 1/2 cup of brown sugar. And my 1/2 cup of white sugar. I'm also going to add my teaspoon of vanilla and my 1/4 cup of buttermilk. I'm just going to use regular milk today. If you don't have buttermilk, you can add a little bit of vinegar to your milk, and that will help kind of thicken it up like buttermilk, but just regular milk also works fine. And then I'm going to add my 1 cup of applesauce. just going to whisk all this together. Okay, next I'm going to add my flour. I'm going to start with my whole wheat flour and see how much I have. My 3/4 cup, and then I'm going to add my other cup that I need. Start to mix that in, and I'm also going to add my teaspoon of baking soda, my half teaspoon of baking powder, teaspoon of salt, and I'm going to add my 1.5 tablespoons of cinnamon, again because I'm using applesauce that doesn't have extra cinnamon in it. And then a teaspoon of nutmeg. Just mix that all together. Okay, I'm also going to add some of these cinnamon chips. I'm just going to start with half the bag and then see how that looks. Okay, I think that'll be good. Okay, so now you're just going to spray your loaf pan and put your batter in there. Okay, so you'll just bake that in a 350-degree oven for 50 to 60 minutes. So those are the 3 recipes that I wanted to share with you guys today. If you could leave me a comment below with some other good make ahead breakfast ideas. I really like just being able to kind of cook a breakfast once a week is usually what I do, and then we just kind of eat on it for most of the week for those of us who eat breakfast. So I would love any other ideas that you guys have. And thanks for watching. I'll see you guys next week. Bye.